Hello, Misfits, and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you all about Twenty-Sided Tavern. Twenty-Sided Tavern is a live D&D show that is happening in New York right now, and I had the lovely privilege of getting to go see it over my holiday break, and I would love to tell you guys all about it. So, Twenty-Sided Tavern, it's a live D&D show, and it kind of blends audience interactions with improv comedy and also throws in real D&D game mechanics as well, and it kind of finds a way of sort of marrying all three kind of components into a really wonderful show. It is playing off Broadway at Stage 42 on West 42nd Street, so not too far away from Times Square. Definitely can walk there from that location. The show has been playing there for a little while now, but the experience is kind of constantly changing, and that has a lot to do with who's in the show. So you've got your typical DM, your dungeon master. You also have a tavern keeper, more on them later, and you also have three players. Like, these three players are your party, and those players are subject to change depending on the show. They have like their sort of regular cast of people that sort of alternate between each other, but then sometimes they bring in special guests to play as one or more of these roles, and they've had all sorts of people come and guest star in this show. They've had Bria Iyengar, Felicia Day, Erika Ishii. Iffy is supposed to show up soon. Jacques Zwipper is slated to come make an appearance. Neil Newbon as well. So they've had lots of people come to the show or are scheduled to be making an appearance in the show. And this sort of like revolving guest slot really does help keep the show interesting. But the improvisational aspect of it, in and of itself, is kind of what makes this show different every single time. So we were fortunate enough to get Erika Ishii as our guest performer for the role of the warrior, which was really, really fun. She wasn't supposed to be there, but I think some people in the cast got sick and she happened to be in town, so we kind of lucked out on that front. It was a blast to get to see her, but I do need to give some mad respect to the Dungeon Master and the Tavern Keeper in this show. Our Dungeon Master was played by Connor Marks, and the Tavern Keeper was Alex Stompoli. And both of them did a tremendous job, and they do not have an easy task at hand. So the Dungeon Master, he has to, like any Dungeon Master would, keep the story moving along, but this is a live show, and they try to keep it all into like a 2.5 hour time slot. So he really has to keep track of time and kind of keep things moving along while not really impeding on the improv if it's good and the audience is really loving it. So that's something that's like really interesting, and I'm sure is a bit of a challenge or takes some practice to get good at, but he did an amazing job. He kept the story moving along, but he still went along with the improv that the characters threw at him, and at the same time he was also juggling just like the general mechanics of the game on top of everything else. So I was super impressed with his ability to do all of those things. Being able to manage the timing of a show that's like half improvised by people other than yourself, that you generally just have to react to, that's no small feat. So, like, mad props to him. And then the Tavern Keeper. So the Tavern Keeper is sort of like, kind of like a co-dungeon master of sorts. This was Alex's role, and it's like, while it's sort of like a co-DM, it's also sort of like a DJ, as far as I could tell. Let me explain. So, it seemed like they were queuing up or managing a lot of the online, like, phone games and audience interaction activities. So, a big component of the game is these things that you can do on your phone that affect what's happening in the game that you're watching, and affects like how the characters handle certain scenarios and things like that. And it seemed like some of these like questions or polls or games that were being sent to people's phones may have been queued up by the Tavern Keeper, or at least to some degree. It also seemed like perhaps they were also, like, queuing up some of the sound things that would happen or some of the graphics that would show up on the screen. It kind of varied. Sometimes it seemed like they were communicating with the tech booth to make these things happen, but sometimes it really looked like they were doing some of that themselves. So if they were, because I don't know for certain, like, that's a crazy feat. That's a lot to handle, and they did an amazing job. On top of that sort of technical aspect of things, they also kind of helped the DM make rulings on things that were happening and help make mechanics suggestions to some improvised aspects of the game. So they were also helping in that regard, and that was really cool. So they, both the DM and the Tavern Keeper, did a really great job. I was super impressed with their ability to manage that game, keep it rolling, and keep everything so tight and, like, running efficiently. It was really well done. Let's talk about the set. So as the name of the show suggests, you are in a tavern. So they set up the whole stage to look like a tavern, and it's really cool looking. The lighting is really neat. They have these lights that go out over the audience, and they're all across the ceiling, and they will, like, change color and dim or brighten depending on what's happening in the show, which was really, really cool. You have, like, a physical set of a tavern with these wooden beams and all these crazy little knickknacks and props set up everywhere. And then you also have this big sort of projection screen in the back, and sometimes that's to look like the tavern that you sort of start out in. Sometimes that's painting the scenery of the locations you're visiting. The show, when we saw it, was set in Waterdeep, so sometimes you're walking through the city of Waterdeep and you're seeing the buildings go by, or you go enter a shop and you see the interior of the shop because of that projection screen. That also helps showcase some cool spell effects when spells are getting cast, or some cool graphics when people make attacks or things happen in the game, which was really, really fun. And on top of that, every character has a camera that is on their dice tray. So whenever rolls are being made, you are seeing live on the screen what's happening and what they're rolling, which is really, really cool. Also, throughout the entire show, you have health bars for all of the characters, and you're watching that tick down as the story progresses, which was fun. By the end of our show, we were definitely all sweating while looking at the health bar for our spellcaster. So aside from the set and the cast, let's talk about just, like, the game and the show itself and how they balance all these different things that are happening. So a big part of this show is the improv. This sort of improv comedy is kind of at the heart of this. And the cast is really funny. They know how to, make a joke that's gonna land. They know how to say and do things that really help, like, make the audience feel like they're having a good time and keeping them engaged. And that's great. I think improv is a core aspect of Dungeons and Dragons just in general. When we look at shows like Dimension 20, they lean really far into that improv comedy to the point where they will have shows and campaigns where the entire cast are comedians, which is great. It makes the show really, really fun and entertaining, and they definitely bring an aspect of that into this 20-Sided Tavern show. But they never let it get too much, in my opinion. I think sometimes we can have so much improv and comedy that we kind of lose the, like, plot line of the story, and we kind of forget about some of the mechanics, and that's fine, but sometimes we need that to help ground us and help us remember, oh, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons. So they never let it get too much. They know how to get back into the gameplay and know how to incorporate that on top of this improv that they're doing as well. It's a pretty tight one-shot, and so the story has to progress. The show must go on, as they say. So they are able to do that. And the DM is definitely, like, I feel like leading that kind of, all right, this bit's done, let's move on. But in a way that is kind of imperceptible to the audience. It just feels like a really nice flowing show. And that is balanced along with gameplay. It's really a nice mix of legitimate 5th edition game mechanics and sort of new, unique interpretations of mechanics that help keep the audience involved. And audience involvement is like a huge aspect of this show, and I think it's why it's so fun and why it's so entertaining to watch, because you are a part of it. Like, you just are. And I think that's really, really fun. In terms of like 5th edition game mechanics, it seemed, as far as I could tell, pretty true to just how it's supposed to be. Now, I will say we only see simplified versions of everybody's character sheet, but I like that. We don't need to see the full character sheet. Everything on that character sheet is not going to come up during the game. It's not going to be relevant. And there's going to be people in the audience that aren't familiar with the game mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons, and we don't want to bog them down with all this stuff that they don't understand. So I really like this. I like that it's like, alright, here's our spellcaster, here's their health, and they're good at this thing. And like, maybe we'll see a modifier to certain things, but really that comes up only in the situations in which it matters. I feel like this makes it very beginner friendly for everybody. It's really easy for people to come in and watch the show, understand what's happening, and not get too confused. Like, that's always the biggest thing about Dungeons & Dragons. There is a learner's curve. It's really hard for people to just jump into the game that have never played before, and sometimes it takes like literal years of playing for them to finally understand certain aspects of the game. And this show doesn't have time for that. It's 2.5 hours long, so they gotta introduce you to it, at least in the ways that matter, and, you know, you can figure out the rest as we go, or maybe you can look into it some more on your own time afterwards. At the top of the show, when the characters are introduced, we see what they're good at, we see a couple, like, key personality traits, and we see their health, and we're off to the races. Throughout the game, characters make rolls and apply their modifiers just like you would in your own home game, but sometimes these ability checks and these decisions are influenced by the audience, and that is what is different and new in this show. That is like a fresh take on some of these classic mechanics. A big aspect of the show are phone games. So they really encourage you to use your phones throughout the show. They want you to take pictures, they want you to video, but also you have to use your phone during the show. So they will have like these polls or these like click games that you play on your phone as the show is going on, and these will help determine whether certain characters get positive or negative modifiers to their next roll, which is really fun. Sometimes there are also physical activities that different members of the audience can engage in order to determine who gets advantage or who gets a buff to their modifier, things like that. One of the games that was played was throwing Velcro balls at a big target, and if you got a certain number within the target, then they got some sort of buff or boost to their next roll, and that was a really fun way to involve the audience. I really liked these things because it didn't actually take away the player's ability to make the roll, but it does help keep the audience involved. So ultimately the player is still making the roll and applying their own character's modifier, but the audience involvement and engagement can help you or hurt you. And more often than not, it's going to help you. The audience wants the players to win, and that is evident throughout the show. In addition to different roles being influenced by the audience, there are some just plain old decisions that are made by the audience through voting or suggestions. So we would have a number of polls that we would see throughout this show. Sometimes this would be as simple as, what song do we want to hear next while we're, waiting during intermission? Sometimes it's as big as, what character is this person going to play as? Sometimes it's determining between two different actions a character could take. Should I cast this spell or this cantrip? Should I, attack in this way or do this crazy thing? And they would present us with the options and we would vote on which one we wanted to see. Sometimes we were voting on where we wanted to go next. So it is a one-shot, it's a pretty tight story, but there would still be different opportunities. I can either take the left path or the right path. Which one do you want to see? And we would vote on it. And then another thing that would happen is literally anytime throughout the show an NPC was introduced, the DM would ask the audience for a name suggestion, and you simply call it out and hope you're lucky enough to get your name put into the show. This was really fun, and we were fortunate enough to get one of my silly character names put into the show. I am not good at coming up with NPC names on the fly. It's a historic fact of my games, and so one such character name that I came up with on the fly that is just terrible and still kind of the butt of several jokes at our table. We got their name worked into the show, so it was so much fun. It was really funny just to hear that uttered and to hear the reactions of the audience members and realize, no, yes, that is stupid, but very funny.
William Shakespeare was a man of many words. He was a wizard. He had multi-classed. He was a bard initially, but it's not important. It just means that he had so many talents. He was smart and kind and funny. He had a penchant for whimsy that warmed any room he walked in. Working together as long as we did, we grew quite close. As our talents grew, so did our curiosity. We began to meddle in magics that we could not control, and one day an accident tracked a piece of the weave inside William Quickspear's body. Quickspear? Quickspear, okay. I forgive myself for saying it out loud and thinking, surely that's not right.
Another thing that gets determined by the audience is the final boss itself. This was really cool. So at the very top of the show, the different cast members walk out in the audience and they have you write down different things on paper. They typically are asking you for a noun and an adjective, and they're taking all these up from the audience and they're put in a big box. This contributes to what the final boss could end up being. We draw out the noun and the adjective from the box, and the DM builds the final boss on the stage during the show using the suggestions that they take from the audience at the beginning. And I thought this was really, really cool. In our particular show, our final boss ended up being our tavern keeper. So he turned into our final boss, and it was a total blast. And the audience sort of votes on the stats of that monster right there, and they build the stat block, and that's what they fight. Overall, I really enjoyed the balance between audience interaction and your typical D&D gameplay. I really thought it was well done. I felt really engaged throughout the entire story. Sometimes when I watch videos of other people's actual plays or listen to recordings of other D&D sessions, there will be lulls. There will be moments of time during the story where things kind of lull a little bit, and it's not that I'm not engaged, but I'm not quite as present as I was throughout the entirety of this show. Because you're an active part of it. You are playing the game with them, and I think that's really, really cool. I think the fun thing about D&D is when you actually get to play it, not just like watch somebody else do it. And so the fact that they've found a way to allow you to play the game in some way while still watching these people play, I thought that was really well done. And something that's cool about this is it's going to be different every single show. So, I mean, the basic premise and outline of this one shot that's being played, sure, that's the same, but the characters are different every time. The decisions that are made are different every single time. The final boss is different every single time. And because so much of it is improv, like, it's never going to be the same, like, jokes and silly moments. It's always going to be changing. So I think that sort of, like, replayability, rewatchability, is really what helps the show be successful. I think that's what makes it so fun. Everybody in this show was incredibly, incredibly nice. So the cast really does try to come out and interact with the audience. They come and talk to you before the show, they'll come out during intermission, they'll come out after the show, and then of course there's stage door where the cast comes out and you can talk to them and get their autographs and everything. Everybody was incredibly nice. We were able to talk to everybody in the cast, at least for just a little bit. I got all of their signatures on my handy-dandy playbill. And yeah, they were so nice. Erica was very, very nice. I was so glad I got to talk with them and get a picture with them. It was a blast, and I really encourage you guys to try and get out and see the show if you're able. I understand New York is not close for everybody, but if you get the chance, definitely go see it. It is worth your while. It is worth your time, and compared to a lot of other Broadway show tickets, this is super reasonable. We were able to get rush seating, which is something that only happens like the day of, and it's for a much lower price, and so my ticket was like $37, whereas other Broadway shows, their tickets could be hundreds of dollars, depending on what you're going to see and who's in it. So definitely try to get out there and see it if you're able. I really can't say enough good things about this show. But yeah, so that's my experience with 20-Sided Tavern. Hopefully that told you a little bit about what it's about and kind of gave you a taste about what you'd be in for. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to support me and the channel, feel free to like and subscribe. That stuff really, really helps me out. But way more importantly, leave a comment down below. The engagement on these videos is what helps other people find the channel, and that is always good. But with all of that said and done, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, a happy new year, and I'll see you again next time. Really had a blast at the show. It was so fun to see William Quakespeare get named drop in the show. I also picked up a little bit of merch. They had these cool, like, kind of glass, like, kind of Stein sort of style mugs, so I picked up one of those. And you can also get a free D20 at the show. They're all, like, in this giant mimic's mouth, and you reach in and grab one, so I grabbed one. Yeah, on top of just getting to see 20-Sided Tavern and stuff like that, I do encourage you guys, if you have the chance, to go support these different shows that are on Broadway and off Broadway. It is so astronomically expensive to go keep a show running on Broadway, and there's a certain magic to these shows that happen and these shows that you get to experience on Broadway that sometimes I feel like it's dying a little bit. And it's sad when I see these shows not get to, you know, stay running for longer. My absolute favorite show of all time is Phantom of the Opera, and it recently closed on Broadway. It no longer is playing here. Of course, you can, you know, hop over to the West End and still see it over there, but yeah, it's sad when a show can't stay up and running, and a lot of that is just the cost of going to see them. So if you're able, go support these shows. Truly, these performances, these stories that get told on these stages, it's such a unique experience, and there really is just something so special and magical about them. If you've never gone and seen a show on Broadway, try to go do it. It's different than a traveling, touring show. Those are great and wonderful, and definitely go see those as well. But there's just a little something extra when you go see a show on Broadway or at the West End. Those things, there's just something about it that is really cool and sort of hard to describe. But we saw a number of other shows while we were up there. It was a quick little jaunt, quick little trip, but shout out to Sunset Boulevard. The production that is running in Broadway right now is incredible. It moved over from the West End, and the cast was incredible. It's like, I was speechless at the end of it. We also saw Maybe Happy Ending, which was very cute, very fun, and Death Becomes Her, which was absolutely hilarious. So, yeah, here's my little Broadway nerd spiel for you there. But I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time.